At the heart of this world, where monsters and magic exist in secret from modern life, is conflict. And among this chaos, there's one endeavor of great undertaking yet to be unleashed upon the world.
They have been swarming into our affairs like locusts.
I wandered aimlessly looking for a place of my own. I never got a chance to find it.
And all this for what? For what? Scraps? Nonsense?
Idiot! Stop stumbling around and come with me.
They are snakes that think themselves dragons.
That's the sad reality we live in. Too much BS being peddled out there, obscuring fact.
Like I need more reasons to think society is terrible.
Horseboy, just follow her lead.
Gonna make this easy and come quietly? Or do you want to do this the fun way?
I wanted to see the world, be daring, help people elsewhere.
Those chosen shall seek the truth of what they face. Let them reveal what is hidden and enlighten the world. Let them seek the truth of Project GNOSIS.
Hey everyone, it's Motzie. What you'll be hearing today is one of our new bonus episodes, Jay and Dooley, in which you get to hear the heartrendingly emotional conclusion to the story of Jay and Dooley. We'll be back for our main story in January, but in the meantime, if you want to listen to these episodes 1 month ahead, as well as get exclusive access to bonus episodes, behind-the-scenes content, some excerpts of scripts for future episodes, and plans for the end of Act 3 and the last act of High Night Season 1, Act 4, which is coming in April, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/HighNightPod. That's HINAYPOD. This is one of the only ways to support High Night financially and help me continue making High Night even as I am currently unemployed and otherwise unable to work on the story without the amazing support of our patrons. Even at our lowest tier, you can get some script excerpts from future episodes, as well as early access to episodes when we are off hiatus. Patrons $10 and above get exclusive bonus episodes and get their names read out at the end of every High Night episode. You can subscribe for as low as $3, but even if you can't subscribe, listening to our episodes on Acast and everywhere you listen to podcasts where you get ads will also help us quite a bit. So regardless, we appreciate all the support that you provide. Please share High Night with people you know who would enjoy it, and please talk about it on socials. Feel free to tag us at HighNightPod, that's HINAYPOD. We're on Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, Facebook, and we are now also on Blue Sky. Anyway, thanks for all the support. Please enjoy this episode of Alasdair Stuart, known for his work on the Magnus Archives as Peter Lucas, in one of his most emotional performances that has personally made me cry. And I wrote the damn thing. Maraming salamat. You're listening to High Night by Motzie Dapul. Jay and Dooley, Part 2.
Mikey, I hope this letter finds you well. There is a lot I can't put down, but I want you to know. Because you are the only one who does know, and it feels right to share with you my joy, after I have shared so much of my sorrow. I went to see Jay. After so long, I visited him at his home. I didn't know what to expect, really. I'd always hoped that he lived, but I couldn't quite picture in my mind what that looked like. If he lived a life of paranoia and fear, or if he lived an ordinary, happy life. The former I could imagine well enough. It was how I believed he was, even in those last days, even when he hid it very well. But it was an unhappy thought, the idea that he hadn't lived a peaceful day since his departure. The idea that he was hounded for decades, while no longer in possession of his greatest tools. The latter, I suppose a selfish part of me would hate it more. The idea that he was happy, while we missed him, or mourned him. But ultimately, that was the life I wished for him. Still, as with all wishes, you must be careful, because what I found in that house shook me more than any of the countless horrors we faced in my youth. I arrived at an idyllic home, a quiet street, but not a lonely one. It was a peaceful little residential block on the fringes of a big city, where children played on the sidewalks and cars drove slowly down a single lane. Not like a run-down apartment block where nobody talks to each other. No, in this place, people acknowledge each other. Like each other, even. I knocked on the front door of this lovely little home, humble, warm, places on the front porch for people to sit at, get some fresh air. And I steeled myself for what I'd find, my mind racing for what to say. Decades. You don't know how much changes in decades. I didn't even know if I'd recognise the man. God, I must have looked a state. Not my best self, and even then I wasn't exactly breaking hearts, but I took the chance. And the door opened up. And there stood this beautiful woman, just about my age, thereabouts, aged more gracefully than I, to be sure, and she smiled at me in a way that soothed my anxieties. But I was confused, nonetheless. I thought perhaps I had the wrong address, though the number was right, and the woman, well, she said, "We've been waiting, even if we'd never met." So, I followed her in. She talked like we were old friends, apologised for the state of the place, which was, of course, immaculate, other than a few scattered toys. Some of the grandchildren were over, she said, though they'd gone to the playground for a few hours. "Thought you'd want to talk in private," she said, giving me a wink I didn't quite understand. In the hallway, there was this row of framed photos filling the wall. What caught my attention was an older one from the 90s. In it, Jay. Different hairstyle, different clothes, but almost unchanged from when I last saw him. He looked like he was rolling his eyes in the photo, but he was smiling nonetheless. Affectionate. Happy. Looking right at whomever was taking the photo. I saw him in more photos. A familiar younger woman on his arm, smiling with all her teeth, cheeks round, eyes shut, like she was making a point of her joy, real joy, but almost like a rebellion. Like she knew how much this joy mattered and she was proud of it. In this dizzying sequence of snapshots, I saw Jay's life. Happy. Fulfilled. Safe. Married to a beautiful woman. Raising a lovely daughter. Adopting, perhaps, 2 other children who looked nothing like them, but who were all together under the Christmas tree as family, with big grins, just like their mum. A gaggle of grandchildren. I don't know how long I stood there, looking at those photos. Felt like a lifetime before this warm voice snapped me out of it, and this gentle hand pulled me by the wrist. "He's in the dining room," she said, a smile gentler, like I was some kind of fragile thing that she did not want to chip. "I'll bring some sweet tea out if you like, or some water." I refused, I think. Don't quite remember, but I'm sure she didn't take me at my word, patting me on the back of my hand, gently leading me to the dining room before she disappeared past the table to the kitchen, and he was there. At the table. Sitting there, looking at his hands. So much older than I last saw him. So much older than his photos. Yet, still, the handsomest man I had ever seen, and the years had not changed that. His hands were clasped together, strong, clever-fingered, now lined with thick, dark veins. He didn't smile when he met me eyes, but I could see the laugh lines around his, and I knew it still came easily. He looked tired, but healthy, happy, but for that moment. I didn't know what to say, and he had nothing to offer. I felt inadequate. All the things I wanted to say withered away after a glimpse of this beautiful life he had lived, that I was suddenly barging into, God, more than 30 years after the fact. I was nothing but an intruder in this home, and I would not speak first. He seemed to want me to, but when I had nothing to say, not even a hello, the first thing he said to me was, "You look well." The fucking prick. But God, we were a match. I don't think I could have done better. "Now, we both know that's a lie," I'd responded, and it was the first smile I got out of him, though there was a sadness there. "You always do that," he said before catching himself. "Used to do that," he corrected. I asked what, and he elaborated. "Every time I tried to say how good you looked, you always denied it, like I didn't have eyes." "Hard not to when you're there to compare with," I responded, but that just made him seem sadder. I'm glad you're safe," I said instead, "and I understand why you never got in touch. It was explained to me by your old friend. The danger. Though I wish you told us more." "I wish that too," he said, looking into the middle distance, pensive, remembering his last words. "I wish a lot of things, but one of my wishes was granted today. Seeing you here. I didn't think I'd see you here." His voice wavered, and the lilt of it struck me a clear memory of how he sounded on the night that he left, on the night he almost... I stood up then. Suddenly, everything felt like too much. I couldn't be... I just couldn't be there. Couldn't look him in the eye, knowing how awfully I'd failed him. He was alive. He was alive this whole time, and I never even... I think I said something like, "I should go," or perhaps I shouldn't be here. I was just about ready to storm out the door when his wife came back, and she looked between us. Jay had stood up too, perhaps to stop me, and clicked her tongue like she was looking at two belligerent children, which, you know. "What did you say to him?" she said testily, putting the ice-cold pitcher down on the table. "Would you sit down, please?" she said to me, much more kindly. Embarrassed at myself, I did, while she poured me a drink. "The love of your life comes knocking at your door after 3 decades, and you have already got him running out of it. You're hopeless." For a moment, I thought she was talking to me, but the rest of her words settled in, and over her shoulder I saw Jay look indignant, although it was clear he knew better than to talk back. "It'd be his right," he said, "if he chose to leave." "But that's not what you want," said his wife. "Just say what you want. For once. It won't kill you." That seemed to give Jay whatever courage he'd been missing, and he reached right over and he took my hand. Closed his eyes and he said, "I missed you so much. Every day, Franny, but I was so afraid he'd know if I reached out. I was so afraid he'd hurt you, and Papa, and Da. I couldn't bear it, and I thought you'd live better without me. Find someone without me. I thought I couldn't be selfish, that coming back into your life would only hurt you. I swear, Franny, I swear, I didn't want to hurt you. It was a lot to take in, for one thing, but in the sea of emotions I was feeling at the confession, I could feel the warmth of his hand in mine. It was like a dream, but knowing the life he'd built, it felt just out of reach. Or so I thought. You have a family, Jay. You have a full life. You don't need a broken old man like me round here mucking it up. At that, Jay laughed, but it was a bitter thing. And he still didn't let go, for which I was grateful. His hand was the only thing keeping me grounded. She wasn't joking, he said, when she called you the love of my life. My own damn wife, Franny. She knows my heart best, for we have no secrets, not one. And she knows that I have thought of you every day. That I regret not kissing you that night before I left. That I regret not telling you how much I adored you. How much time I wish I hadn't wasted. Because I was a coward. It was too strange to hear those words coming from him, for despite his flaws, Jay had never been a coward. Not in his work, and not in the freedom of his affections. So many years he'd spent trying to coax me out of Michelle. Help me understand my own feelings. And I told him as much. I told him he wasn't a coward, and I wouldn't hear a damn word of it. Even if we couldn't be together, then I was always honoured to be by his side when we faced horrors together. Even if I couldn't admit to him how I really felt, I was blessed to have known him. Why does it feel like you're saying goodbye? He said, chuckling. You only just got here. I felt that I had to point out what seemed obvious to me, but clearly I was missing something. Jay, you have a wife. He asked then if I knew why she knew me, which I suppose struck me as a little odd. She welcomed me like an old friend, like I'd come home to family that I had not had in years. And he explained. When they first met, they were first beginning to grow close. There was much that he held back. She, it turns out, met him under unusual circumstances, so it wasn't that she didn't know his knowledge of the strange, or his dealings with the supernatural. She was stubborn, he said, with such depth of affection. She wanted to know all about him, until the moment she found herself up against the enormity of his heartache. She asked to know me, the man who had his heart. So he told her about me, about our time together. Hundreds of stories. He didn't want to lose them, he said. Precious memories, experiences shared with one he loved so dearly, and it was she who kept those memories alive, shared them with their children, their grandchildren. It may be strange, he said, to be so loved by those you do not know, but you could know them, if you stay. And I looked to his wife, and she gave me the warmest of smiles, and she said, stay a while. You're wanted here by more than just my fool husband. You don't need to be afraid. So I stayed. How could I not? We sat there, chatting over iced tea for what seemed like hours. She was effervescent, and we got on like old friends as she questioned the veracity of some of Jay's stories, especially the ones that made him look a little too good. And he complained that he had no allies against our onslaught, but he seemed overjoyed underneath it all. I met their children. I met their grandchildren, and some of them seemed shocked that I was even real, let alone there with them. Now that took my attention for a good part of the day, as they asked me about their favourite adventures of ours, from the time we were nearly cut to ribbons in the middle of nowhere field out in the countryside, or our time trying not to drown in the Yonge Strip bathhouses trapped with a bitter ghost who died too young. I told them of my notes, no longer with me, since I thought you'd do better with the ones that didn't burn, the attack on the apartment, but it was quite a trip down memory lane, nonetheless, to go over it with a captive audience. Honestly, Mikey, it was really strange. I came there wanting to see Jay again, but sometime during the commotion he disappeared, leaving me with his family. Not that it was a problem, I've spent so much time alone wishing for exactly this. Family that I could be open with, telling them the truth of my life, instead of hiding away. I found him after dinner, sitting on the porch enjoying the quiet night, looking like Bilbo. He said not a word, but gestured for me to sit with him and took my hand without hesitation when I settled. There were many things I still wished to say, though I feared the fragility of this piece. So I went with softer observations. How young he looked for his age, which he said must have been his pocket watch, the strange and powerful thing that he never fully understood, even in the years he spent matching power with his enemies. I miss my cat, he said, seemingly apropos of nothing, but when he explained what she really was, well, a story for another time. He asked if I'd stay. Really stay, and he squeezed my hand as he asked. I told him about you, but I know you don't need me. Not that I'll stop worrying about you, mind. Not till I'm dead and buried. I knew I had nothing to return to in Toronto, and I knew all I wanted was to stay. But in the end, I couldn't bring myself to hope. Not just yet. So I said I'd think about it, but that I would at least stay the night. Before the end of that strange, frightening, perfect day, I found myself lying in a soft queen in their smallest guest room, hardly hearing and yet somehow feeling the sleeping breaths of those in that crowded house. A family that I had long since accepted I could never have. And in that darkness, I heard the door opening. I felt the bed dip where he sat. He didn't say a word. Just sat there. I was turned away. Perhaps he thought I was asleep. I felt him shift. Lie down ever so carefully like he didn't want to wake me. He stayed along the outer edge, never touching me still for so long, I thought he might have fallen asleep that way. But when I turned to look, I could see his eyes, clever stars in the dark, under a tired brow. I turned fully then, our ruses both void. Reached out to touch his hand resting between us, then more boldly brushed my fingers gently against his face, his worn cheek. It was not the face I dreamt of, or searched for in my nightmares. It was not the face I remembered when I looked back on our time together. But it was all the better for how real it was, soft against my palm. He turned his face and kissed my hand. For a moment he smiled more freely than I had ever seen. And then he began to sob. I am still well, Mikey, so please don't worry about me. They call me Grandpa Franny. Shut up. And the little ones sit on my lap and beg me to tell them stories. I try to tell them ones they haven't yet heard, but there are precious few of them. Perhaps one day you'll come visit and we'll have a wealth of new adventures to share, but I suppose your story isn't quite finished yet. Stay safe, Mikey. That's all I ask. I've lost loved ones before, though by some great miracle I have found one again, and discovered so many more besides. Just, please, stay safe. With all my love, Dooley.
You're listening to Hainai by Motzie Dapul.